the challenge product managers have is that their work is non-visual. Their toolkit is basically creating sort of requirements documents. And I think the age of that has kind of elapsed.
Benjamin Humphrey, co-founder and CEO of Dovetail, the platform transforming customer research into actionable insights. With background in design and product leadership at Asana, Benjamin has built Dovetail into a tool trusted by over 3,700 organizations, including Canva, Cisco, and Shell.
This whole idea of consumerization of enterprise software products that came out maybe 10, 15 years ago, like Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, were kind of these modern, delightful, easy to use. So now we're getting up this kind of new wave of business software that is easy to use and kind of looks good and delightful. For us, we've always been a kind of bottoms up PLG kind of business. And so the whole idea is let's make some software that end users enjoy using. I prefer to build kind of in the open, build in the public, and try to actually like kind of co-create with customers as much as possible. Activity equals outcomes. The more stuff that's happening, the more product improvements we're making, the more velocity, the more pull requests, the more, design work. It's going to result in something good happening. Make your designers and engineers accountable for it and give them that sense of ownership, and then they will naturally want to.
Welcome to today's episode of the Product Growth Podcast. I'm really excited about today's guest, the founder and CEO of one of my favorite products as a product person, Dovetail. This is Benjamin Humphrey. He started the company and he's still leading it today. Benjamin, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much. Really good to be on the podcast.
So if you've been following the newsletter, I've been writing about Dovetail, and where did I place Dovetail? I placed it in this category of design-led challengers. Companies like Notion, Figma, they're a delight to use. Another one in the CRM space is like Adio. So tell me a little bit more. It feels to me like these design-led challengers are kind of taking over SaaS right now. What's in the moment that's happening?
Yeah, I guess, I suppose this whole idea of consumerization of enterprise software, I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but I guess these products that came out maybe 10, 15 years ago, like Instagram and Facebook and, Twitter, were kind of these modern applications that were consumer facing, and they were very kind of like delightful, easy to use. Obviously, design was a big part of those apps. And I think what happened over the last sort of like 5 or 10 years is that we've seen that same kind of approach applied to business software. And so now we're getting up this kind of new wave, I suppose, of business software that is easy to use and kind of looks good and delightful. And I think a lot of brands are making that into a bit of a differentiator. Linear obviously being a great example as a challenger to Jira. They want to differentiate on the user experience, and obviously Jira has an infamously poor user experience in the eyes of the market. So I suppose it's kind of this PLG thing that's happened in the last 5 or 10 years. But I think the roots go back to this whole notion of consumerization of enterprise software.
Yeah, I think that is actually the trend, which that was something we were talking about right even when Slack was founded, like 10, 12 years ago. Oh, there's this consumerization of enterprise software. Interestingly enough, you were a designer on Jira, the growth team, albeit for 4 years, and you brought up Linear. That is obviously the striking example in kind of that Series B space. Even if you go all the way up to like $100 billion companies, though, you have Airbnb. If you go up to like $3 trillion, you have your Apple. So there's always kind of been this history of design-led companies in tech. There just seems to be this new wave. It's like a class of PLG. For instance, where I was at Apollo.io, we're not known for being design-led. We're known for being product-led. So that was like a product-led growth company versus y'all are like this design-led movement. Have been an intentional sort of way of building product, of building the company on your part?
I would say so. I feel like it's kind of goes hand in hand with PLG, right? Because like if you're entering the organization that you're selling into via the bottom of the org, and you're trying to sell to individual contributors and end users, what they're going to value is going to be different to what an enterprise like executive buyer is going to value. And so you want to have something that appeals to people who appreciate, a good end user experience. And so I think it goes hand in hand with PLG in that sense. And for us, we've always been a kind of bottoms up PLG kind of business. And so the whole idea is like, let's make some software that end users enjoy using.
Is your product team having trouble in capturing the true voice of customers? That's because user feedback is scattered across channels, making it nearly impossible to catch crucial conversations. It's time you're able to centralize your voice of customer from everything like your CRM, customer portals, call recordings, or even public reviews. That's where Zeta.io comes in, our podcast partner today. With Zeta's AI, you can plug your customer conversations in, and it will allow you to easily slice and dice these into actionable insights for your key product areas so that you can do more to improve NPS scores, analyze features, identify new features, or perhaps understand why you lost a few deals. This paves the way for planning the right features and channeling your efforts into actually planning and building your roadmap to finally close that loop 10 times faster. Product managers around the world use Zeta.io and use it to really improve their product discovery. It's plug and play in just minutes. So visit zeta.io/LPS/AkashGupta to get an extra 10% off.
Okay, so I want to go into in detail how this affects how you build product, but I think first we need to catch everybody up on kind of the history of your product teams. At Dovetail, most of our listeners will have some product designers, most will be product managers. What has been the size and scope of PM teams at Dovetail over time?
Yeah, so I guess like we're a 120 person business right now. We don't really have individual contributor product managers at the moment, but we have had them in the past. So we used to have a team of, I think it was around 4 or 5 product managers for a couple of years. We did a multi-product thing a couple of years ago where we kind of split the product up into a few different products. And I can talk about that later on if you want to. But essentially we had a product manager for each team. We had a fairly straightforward setup with like a engineering team lead, design, a senior designer, and a product manager for each of those teams. We ultimately decided that the timing wasn't right, I guess, for us to have product managers. The business was probably a bit too small to have that many of them. And so we ended up, replacing the product managers, I guess, with design team, last year sometime. So it's sort of changed, I guess, how we build product. But I think for now, like myself, I run the product with SK, who's our VP of product, and between the two of us, we're kind of a two ICPMs in the business at the moment. So, but like when you've only got a 50 person engineering team, you don't need that many product managers, in my opinion.
And when I did the piece on Dovetail, what was striking, not just from you, but hearing from everybody else who's part of Dovetail, is that your first 10 employees in particular seemed to be very product focused. Like you weren't just hiring like kind of your run-of-the-mill engineers that want a design ready in Figma and a really good PRD. You were hiring product-focused people. Is that still how you're kind of hiring and focusing on building out those teams?
Yeah, I think we like hiring engineers who have kind of like a product mind to them. I think, for us, it's about getting involved in what customers are doing and asking for, and making sure that our engineers are kind of actively talking to customers as much as they can, and obviously using Dovetail to engage with, all of the kind of conversations that are happening, even in sales and CS, as well as through voice of customer. So I would say we have probably engineers that are more interested in building a product than they are, I guess, just like working through a list of tickets that have been given to them by a PM. And so we have quite an active engagement model, I suppose, between engineering and design, where it's very collaborative, and the two roles kind of work together to figure out the right solution based on kind of technical feasibility and what the customer requirements are going to be. And that works pretty well, I would say.
That's cool. So you have your engineers going in there and using Dovetail's functionality, checking out the sales calls, checking out the customer support calls. Are they even using like collecting user feedback, or do designers typically lead that? Or how do you guys handle like, proactive outreach to customers and recording of calls?
Yeah, so I guess we have like in San Francisco, we have our go-to-market teams. So we've got salespeople, customer success managers. That's about a 10 person team in total. and they will do lots of conversations with customers. All of that gets recorded and put into Dovetail. And then we also have a bunch of voice of customer channels. So we have like intercom for support tickets, and then we put feedback buttons inside the product as well. So typically when one of the product teams will ship a new feature, they will put like a feedback button into the product, and people will submit feedback that gets routed to Dovetail as well. Now with our new channels product, we can actually kind of like synthesize those pieces of feedback into themes, and so the product team can actually be alerted of incoming feedback. So I think we have kind of different like disparate sources, I would say, across the business, but it's very much like an autonomous thing that product teams are in charge of themselves.
So between your product, Dovetail, and the way you build product, I think you're kind of the living embodiment of PM's worst nightmare, which is AI designers and engineers and founders taking over their job. So I really want to like unpack that for a moment before we go any deeper, which is like, you've been a designer, you've worked hand in hand with traditional product managers when you were at Atlassian. Their culture is often held up as one of the better product management cultures. So you've seen the good side of PM. Now you've kind of had a very lean startup sort of way of approaching PM. What's your forecast for the field of product management as tools like Dovetail build so much automation in that designers and engineers can do a lot of the knowing your users part of PM that was considered like one of their main value adds?
Yeah, like if you look at, I guess, the role of product management, I guess doing customer research and talking to customers, obviously PMs have kind of renamed that product discovery because they don't like the term research, but same diff, right? Like talking to customers was something that I guess PMs would do a lot of. I think now it's easier for designers to do that, and a lot of businesses have full-time user research teams who will do this kind of stuff as well. So I think that's interesting that that's kind of been democratized in a sense. And then you have obviously like tooling like Figma that allows designers to kind of more rapidly bring ideas to life in a visual way. And I think that the challenge product managers have is that their work is non-visual. It's not like they can throw together a quick prototype in Figma or as an engineer, create like a prototype in the code base. As a product manager, their toolkit is basically creating sort of requirements documents. And I think the age of that has kind of elapsed in a sense. So the way that we work is that we don't really do that kind of stuff. We just kind of, we heavily use Figma to create design mockups and prototypes and things. We have a design system that's fairly comprehensive, and we do a lot of whiteboarding and sketching and kind of in-person stuff as well. So we're like in the office, 4 days a week, and some of the teams will just kind of work together in person to come up with new ideas for features and concepts and things like this. And I guess like we don't do the sort of stuff that you would typically do as a product manager. Like we very rarely use documents. We don't have like Notion, there's not really requirements docs flying around. We don't do bases, or we don't have a decision-making process or anything like that. There's no framework for that. I mean, we use Linear to track issues and bugs and stuff, but it's pretty ad hoc, to be honest, and pretty scrappy. And so, if there's going to be a workshop or something like that, it's going to be the designers that's going to organize it. So I suppose we kind of just don't really do a lot of typical planning that you would find product managers would do.
Yeah, and we'll get into how you exactly do that in the absence of formal planning processes. But for your average founder who's like aspiring for working this way, but considering hiring a product manager, you've now seen kind of both sides of the coin, the hiring 5 to 6 PMs at a fairly early stage, or kind of running it yourself, maybe with a right-hand man and a VP of product like SK. What's your recommendation for these founders? What's the mental framework they should have for when they should be hiring PMs?
I think like you probably don't need to hire PMs for a while, right? Like I think the Linear founder talked about this a wee bit. He was saying you can probably get by without product managers until you're like a 50 or 100 person business. It depends what your skill set is as a founder. If you are as a design founder or an engineering founder or a product founder, I think you can get quite far without needing to hire a PM. I think that The challenge is essentially figuring out what the level of autonomy is that you want those product managers to have. And I think that was the issue that we had is if you can say, hey, like we want to, let's say you're linear and you're like, we want to build a better Jira, it's an established software category. There's an incumbent that you can look at and you can say, hey, well, we need these features because they have those features and we're trying to steal their customers. You can go and, I guess, task a product team and a product manager to sort of go and do that work, right? And it's fairly autonomous because it's like, go and assess their product, do the competitor analysis, talk to their customers, figure out how to build the software that's going to work for us to disrupt them. Our problem is, I guess, that it's a new type of software. It's a new category of software. Like there's no such thing as a customer insights hub. Like we kind of came up with that term. And so it's very inventive. You have to be very innovative. You have to be very entrepreneurial. And a lot of the time, the customers aren't going to give you the answers when you're building something that doesn't exist already. So I think our challenge was that we had this very ambiguous kind of amorphous, squishy problem where we were trying to innovate and build this new category of software. And unless you're a founder, it's very difficult, I think, to figure out how to find product market fit and kind of operate in that sort of mode of working. I think a lot of PMs fall into their existing processes and behaviors and frameworks and stuff like that might have worked at a larger company, but in a small startup that's trying to find its own product market fit with its own product, it's new, it's kind of tricky, I would say. And so it kind of depends, I guess, on like your skills as a founder, and it also depends on the type of product that you're building, I think, and whether there's some prior art out there or not.
So we've been talking around it. Now I want to get really specific about this, right? How does a design-led, founder-led company really build product? So let's start at like planning and strategy. How do you build your product strategy and plan around what are going to be your big rocks over a given time frame?
Yeah, so I guess it's not particularly scientific. We don't follow a framework or a process, and it changes over time. But I get it at a high level. We probably do, I would say, design vision workshops maybe once every 12 months, where we sort of try to visualize, where we think the product is going in the next kind of 12 to 18 months. So we're quite short-term focused at the moment. I think a few years ago, before AI, we were a bit more longer-term focused, but since ChatGPT came out and kind of AI is obviously changing everything, we've had to sort of zoom in and be a lot more short-term focused. So we kind of plan on, I would say, roughly 12-month cadence. And typically what happens is we kind of come into Australian summer. So we're recording this now in October. So we're getting close to kind of Australian summer before the Christmas break. And we'll do like a bit of design workshop stuff with the design team, maybe for a week or two, essentially synthesizing a lot of the kind of stuff we've heard that year from customers, doing some competitor analysis, kind of trying to figure out exactly what we want to do next calendar year. And then we'll create a bunch of concepts, mostly hand-drawn. We'll also do some stuff in Figma, some high-fidelity stuff. And we kind of use this to inspire the business, I would say, and also try and figure out exactly what we're going to build next year. And then we kind of work towards, I would say, like 6 monthly release cycles, it seems. So we kind of release, obviously, things continuously, but we do these kind of 6 monthly launches. We just did one the other day called Dovetail 3.0, and then we have this annual conference that happens in April called Inside Out in San Francisco. And so I think what we're going to do is try to aim for a big launch at that conference, and then we'll do another big launch in the second half of next year. So we kind of have this design vision, right? And it's usually a Figma prototype plus a bunch of maybe like a blog post that kind of talks about what the future of the product looks like. And each of the designers go away and kind of start to think about how they implement that within their own teams. So the product org is broken up into, I think we have 5 or 6 product teams. So for example, we have a team called Search and Discover. It's pretty self-explanatory what they do. Funnily enough, they call themselves the SAD team, SAD, Search and Discover, which is quite funny. So we have Search and Discover. We have a team called Projects. They're responsible for the kind of core experience within Dovetail. We have a team called Channels. They're working on the new voice of customer product that we launched to the platform team. So it's a fairly straightforward kind of setup in terms of product org. And then each designer will go away and kind of work with their engineers to figure out how they actually take this vision and make it into a reality. And what that looks like is, again, more workshops, more sketching, more design work, and then some prioritization discussions and kind of just start working through it, I guess.
Okay, so it sounds like those design vision workshops are doing a lot of the heavy lifting of what is often kind of an elaborate annual planning process that PMs typically would run point on, where they collect, millions of ideas from the whole business, plus the team brainstorms ideas. Then they put those into a spreadsheet and they put kind of like impact and work. You guys are kind of eschewing that entire process. So one of the important things that happens in that process is kind of this collecting ideas from the business and work effort estimation. How do you guys handle those two elements?
Yeah, so I think I'm super involved in the process, I guess, and Srinivas is as well. And so we will, I'm in those workshops, right? So I guess from a stakeholder perspective, I can have an opportunity to provide my input. And it's not necessarily, I'm not just reviewing stuff, I'm actually in there. I'm in Figma, I'm doing design work, I'm sketching, I'm part of the process. So I suppose from a business needs perspective, it's very easy because I'm in the room, So, and as the founder, obviously I have a lot of context in the last several years of building the product and a lot of the customer context. We kind of roadshow stuff too, I would say. The designers will just kind of book in meetings with random salespeople, CSMs, marketing people, get ideas for things. We have Friday morning every week we do a company-wide demos, and so we'll show the whole company kind of how we've been tracking in the workshop, kind of give them an update on what the latest ideas and concepts and things are, and people will give us feedback on that. They'll drop comments in the Zoom call, or they'll post in Slack, and I think that it's a very kind of collaborative process that just happens organically, I suppose, for a few weeks. There is an overarching product strategy in a sense. We have the company-wide strategy is quite simple. It's called the 3 Horizons strategy. It's pretty common. And for us, Horizon 1 is just to own researchers and make sure that user researchers have a great experience on the product. Because we're a land and expand business, you need to kind of start with your foot in the door with a role that is the right kind of role to start with. So user researchers work well for us for a few reasons. But then Horizon 2, which is our kind of mode of operating right now, our focus right now, is winning designers onto the product. Designers obviously don't have as much time to do research as full-time researchers, and so we need to kind of improve the product in terms of its efficiency to help them. And then we have a third horizon, which is winning customer experience teams who are doing voice of customer. So there's kind of a bit of a sequence, I guess. And so when we do our vision work, we kind of trying to think through, right now we're focused on Horizon 2. How do we make the product better for designers? How do we make the product better for customer experience teams dealing with their voice of customer data? And that will factor into it. But that's the extent of the product strategy, basically. It's just those three horizons, and then a product vision prototype. And I don't know, I feel like it's not over-engineered at all. We don't have any, we've previously had, we've previously done the whole, lengthy planning thing with multi-week workshops and endless amounts of Notion blog posts and documents and stuff, and really kind of thorough strategic frameworks and competitive analysis and kind of where we play, magic quadrants and all kinds of stuff, right? And I find that the best thing is just to visualize where we're going. And so for that, nothing beats a high fidelity Figma prototype, to be honest, just to show the whole company where we're going with the product. And then you asked about prioritization. I think each team kind of takes the ideas at a high level, right? So if we consider something like Ask Dovetail. So that started as a hackathon project where basically a team took our magic search feature and put that into Slack. And we were like, oh, this is pretty cool. It works well, but can we make it conversational? You can ask follow-up questions. Can you have a kind of concept of a digest where you can subscribe to a podcast and do all these other things? And so the designers, I guess, came up with these ideas, these concepts, and then worked with the engineering team in Search and Discover to prioritize a few that they wanted to ship for the MVP, basically. And we have a lot of other ideas for that product, but it was just a simple whiteboard exercise of kind of cost versus impact, or effort versus impact. And they were like, yeah, I think we're obviously putting it into Slack is going to be pretty straightforward, but then the conversational stuff we need to spark out. And so it's a dialogue, right? It's not like there's no product manager saying like, this is the requirements for the MVP, this is the list of features in the stack rank order, here's all the tickets for you to start executing on. It's kind of like more ad hoc than that.
Yeah. One interesting thing you just mentioned was spike out. So is there like an engineering spike process, or what exactly was that a reference to?
Yeah, I think it's very non-standardized. So each team will kind of do their own thing. Some teams will take a few days just to kind of spike something. Other teams will spend like a good couple of weeks diving into something. We have platform teams that kind of support as well. So we have like an AI platform team that act as, I guess, a little bit like a consulting kind of approach. And they also build kind of APIs and abstractions and stuff like this on top of Bedrock and Anthropic's models to help the product teams implement AI features faster. So, perhaps the product team might go and work with the AI team for a few days and try and figure out if they can do something or they can't do something, and then turn that into a feature. But yeah, it's I guess from a sort of process or frameworks perspective, what do we have? I mean, we have, annual vision kind of workshops that we do. We have a sort of lightweight planning process. We use Linear. We have, a heavy usage of Figma, and then we have occasional spikes. But honestly, like a lot of it is just ad hoc, just working together at our desks and just kind of collaborating and drawing stuff and making quick decisions. We're just kind of getting stuff done, to be honest. Like we're not really writing stuff down that much.
So that's really interesting that you mentioned like getting stuff done, because I think that speed and quality, sometimes people almost feel like they're at odds. I've heard them described as like, like a triangle, like, speed, quality, impact. If you pull one direction, you're sacrificing in other directions, for instance. How do you think about that? And how do you drive both the speed and quality?
Look, it's like really hard. We have these two values. One of them is called do the thing, and the other one's called if we do it, we nail it. And, one's about speed, one's about quality, and the teams always get like kind of tangled up because they're like, well, which one is it? And I think it's both. And I think good product teams can execute on new things at speed while maintaining a quality bar that's expected. For us, I think I would prefer to cut scope on something than cut the quality. So what I do is try to push the product teams to think about how can they do less but better. And I think that's in the value. If we do it, we nail it. Is this idea that if we choose to do something, we should do it well. If we don't feel like we can do it well, then we should not do it. Or if we've done something that we don't feel like we've nailed, we should actually probably remove it if we don't feel like we can make it work. And so there's some things in the product that we shipped and we weren't happy with, and we're trying to get rid of it. We're trying to unship those features because we don't feel like we nailed it, and we also don't have the capacity or sort of it's not important enough for us to go back around and fix them up. So I think in terms of like how do we kind of tactically maintain the quality bar, I mean, we dog food the product a lot. The whole kind of company uses Dovetail regularly. So we get a lot of internal feedback. We do like blitzes all the time. So the product team will invite a lot of people along to a blitz, and we'll sit in the meeting room and we'll just kind of like try to break the stuff that they've built. We have kind of like standards around sort of user interface polish. So for example, keyboard accessibility, ARIA labels and stuff for accessibility, color contrast stuff. The front-end component library has APIs for like button components and things where you have to pass through tooltips and things like that, so that when you hover on a button, you show a tooltip, and it's like a whole bunch of stuff, I guess, in place that tries to make sure that the interface is kind of polished. And then we do a lot of, on the engineering side, we have quite a mature CI/CD infrastructure. So we do continuous deployment. So whenever something's merged to master, it goes out to customers. We do zero downtime deployments. And then we have like a full suite of, automated testing, unit tests, as well as like visual regression tests. Big users of Chromatic and Storybook as well. So we do like a lot of user interface testing to look for regressions and things like that. So there's a lot of automation that tries to avoid us shipping bad stuff. And then I think culturally, the teams are encouraged to share their work early and often for feedback. Oh, we're also huge users of feature flags. So we have this like massive amount of feature flags. Internally, we will turn all the feature flags on for our own workspace, and we'll be trying out new features and things like that, weeks before they're shipped to customers, and getting feedback internally as well on them. So I'm also across like everything that's happening typically. Like if there's some feature, some product that's going out, typically before it's shipped to customers, I'll have my eyes over it and be able to provide feedback and hopefully maintain a quality bar.
Okay. So there's a bunch of different things in there. One of the first details I want to stick on is like feature flagging and experimentation. Do you do a lot of experimentation, and what tool do you use for feature flagging?
Yeah, so we have a growth team. It's a very small growth team. It's only one engineer and a product marketing person who kind of is sort of also doing a bit of PM work, I guess, for growth. And so they do like A/B tests and stuff for our free plan. So we get like a decent number of signups on the free plan, and so they will do A/B tests to see what the impact on conversion rate is. We also do like staged rollouts of features too, especially AI stuff where it's going to hit our, obviously AWS and Bedrock, they put in place throttling and rate limits and stuff. So we have to kind of progressively deploy new features that are using those services so that we don't overload the capacity that we have through Amazon. So we do progressive rollouts of things as well. But in terms of feature flags, we use Launch Darkly, and we've kind of implemented our own sort of system, I guess, on top of that. So like in the product, when you log in with a Dovetail account, you get this whole set of extra functionality that customers don't get. So you can like switch your feature flags on and off. You can change your Stripe subscription so we can quickly see what the experience is like for an enterprise customer versus like a free customer, and all the restrictions there. You can change your user role. So there's a whole bunch of kind of dev tools, I guess, built into Dovetail that allows us to quickly dog food different experiences within the product.
That one in particular is one I haven't always had, which is easily being able to go through the different plan types and understand what the user experience is. That's an underrated thing for quality.
100%. And we've had in the past, we've had at any one point probably 20 different legacy plans, which is quite complicated. So we've recently actually done a sort of pricing migration to try to clean up a lot of those legacy plans, which were, overcomplicating the code base and the conditional logic and stuff in the code base. So we've just been doing that and migrating customers over to the new pricing plan. So now we've got it down to just 4, which is pretty good. So we have only 4 different experiences in terms of pricing, which is nice.
Rare. Yeah. That means you just did the big migration, but the migration is important for that quality, going back to kind of maintaining quality and speed at the same time. So one of my favorite quotes from the last conversation we had was, we want to push less things to 80% and more to 100%. Can you just reflect on that a little bit more?
Yeah. So I think it's interesting, like in this kind of world where you're trying to be super competitive with AI tools popping up all the time, and you're trying to kind of, meet these ever-changing customer requirements and user expectations. I mean, ever since ChatGPT came out, it feels like everybody kind of just expects software to just, work wonders for them instantly and for free. And I think, the end user expectations for software have kind of gone through the roof now. So we've kind of spent the last 18 months, I guess, moving really quickly to try to improve the product and ship a lot of new functionality, especially as it relates to AI. And it's tough to kind of maintain the quality bar as you do that. We had a feature. I'll give you an example of a feature that we built and we had turned on internally and we were using for a while, and we decided it wasn't there, and so we actually removed it. So we had this feature called Magic Insights, and we were thinking, okay, well, how cool would it be if Dovetail could just kind of give you the insights at the end of your project? And so the team kind of built this feature out, and we were using it for a while. And so you'd input all of your calls and stuff like that. You put all your documents in Dovetail, and we'd generate these insights for you. And the quality of the insights, it wasn't too bad. It was fairly generic, though. It was kind of like obviously large language model, kind of law of averages kind of thing. We learned that there needed to be a lot more actionable and kind of have recommendations and things like that. So we kind of tweaked them a wee bit, but the actual problem wasn't in the AI part of the product or part of that feature. There were some questions around kind of like the state management. So if you have these kind of insights that are generated for you, what if you then go and add a bunch of extra data? Do we change those insights, or do we create new ones? Do we delete the original ones? Can you regenerate them? Is it up to, is something you should be thinking about, or should we be thinking about it? And so we kind of had this challenge, which was just like, at what point do you want to get new insights? And it's kind of like a tough question to answer, because if you've got a continuous set of discovery calls, you probably don't want to get the insights until you've done a few of them. We don't know how many you're going to do, though. And so do we wait until you tell us that you've finished? And so it sort of ended up being this sort of awkward UX, really, where it was kind of like, I've kind of uploaded a couple of calls, I've got some insights, but I haven't quite finished yet, so they're not fully thought through. I don't know how to regenerate them. I'm not finished yet. It's kind of this awkward user experience. And so we were using it for, I don't know, like a few weeks. And then we decided that it wasn't good enough to ship, but we liked some of the ideas that we had there. And we liked the technology spike and everything like that. So we are going to introduce that feature at some point in the next few months, but we need to figure out the sort of state management of it. And so that's the kind of thing where you don't really think about that much, I guess, as when you're just like in sort of planning phase. But we certainly experienced it by building it, and trying it ourselves.
Yeah, and as you're trying to kind of like replace a VOC program with AI, I think another part of it might be like, what if they do make the fix? How do you update the state of no longer having that recommendation because they've fixed it? I guess, you do have things like channels, so you could look at, okay, we're not getting Zendesk tickets about it, but what if that recommendation didn't come from there? It came from a sales call or something. You can imagine there's a lot of corner cases, and that's where quality really comes in. It's like you're actually thinking through all these corner cases to make sure that the user experience is right around the edges.
Yeah, it's complicated stuff for sure. And I don't know, I feel like we have a kind of bias for action, I guess, where we'll just kind of start just building something or just kind of like designing something rather than talk about it. And then we sort of try it out and see what we think about it. And even before code, like we'll do that in Figma, right? The designers are always prototyping new ideas, and they're kind of coming over to me and being like, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? And I'm like, oh yeah, it could work. I think it could be better if it was like this or whatever. So it's very, I don't know, just do the thing, I guess.
So rewinding back about 15 minutes, we were talking about those design vision workshops that do a lot of the heavy lifting for your planning. If you were to give somebody kind of like the 5-minute primer on how to run those well and what those look like from the inside and some of the mistakes you've made and how you've fixed those now, what would that be?
Yeah, so we kind of run it a little bit like Jake Knapp's Sprint. I don't know if you've come across that book. He was a designer, and I think it was Google Ventures. And it's kind of like a 5-day thing. I don't know. I read the book a long time ago, so I'm not sure necessarily if we follow his playbook to the T, but essentially what we do is we kind of start the workshop with a bit of an understanding of what the status quo is at the moment. and we'll go and kind of review, I guess, the feedback that we have. We'll talk about, trying to align on kind of why we're here and sort of what we want to achieve, the goals for the workshop and everything like this. Usually, I really like workshops that are finished. You've done all the work in the workshop. You don't, because a lot of the time you do a workshop and then you're like, oh, we'll write the blog post or we'll finish the prototype like next week. And it doesn't work for me. So I like it when we set aside time to actually communicate and everything in the workshop agenda. So for example, we'll start it on Monday morning. We'll do like an alignment session, try to understand the status quo, have a look at the competitors, do that kind of stuff. Look at the user feedback that we're receiving, maybe do some stakeholder interviews, and kind of spend Monday just sort of getting into the right frame of mind. Tuesday would be, concepting. So we do like crazy eights, we do sketching and stuff. We do like whiteboarding, prototyping, wireframing, just really kind of getting all the ideas we have out there and trying to sort of, just start coming up with a lot of concepts. So by the end of that day, we might have, 50 concepts, something like that. And there's probably like, 5 people in this workshop. It's not a big workshop. It's just a few designers working together and maybe an engineer or two. And so we have a bunch of concepts at the end of that day. Then we'll kind of, stack rank those concepts on a sort of rough effort to impact Magic Quadrant. And then we kind of end the day with like maybe, 5 or 10 that we want to explore in high fidelity. So then on the Wednesday, we'll kind of just sit there with our headphones on and just kind of like mock out those ideas. We kind of divide up and conquer. So each designer will take a few and mock them up, and ideally end the day with a bunch of high fidelity stuff. Then on Thursday, we'll bring all of that stuff together into a single kind of master prototype. So we'll kind of merge in all of these concepts into a single a single kind of set of screens. We have a thing in Figma, which is kind of like our application represented in Figma as we call them reference screens. So similar to how like an architect firm would have like a set of blueprints that they're constantly updating for a project. We have a set of reference screens, which are kind of like the Figma representation of the product that use all of the components that we have in Figma as an example of how you use the product in different ways, different patterns. So it's quite easy just to kind of compile a bunch of stuff together using that. And so then by the end of Thursday, we've got ideally like a high fidelity prototype that we can walk people through. And we're kind of like stopping people as they walk past, on the way to the bathroom or getting a coffee or pulling them into the room, being like, hey, what do you think about this idea? Like, do you think this is feasible? Oh, like this engineer kind of knows about that technology. Go talk to them. And so by the end of the day on Thursday, we kind of have a good idea of like how it all comes together. And then on Friday, we just set that time aside probably to refine it and then turn it into a bit of a blog post with a narrative, I would say. So historically, what we've done is we've published an internal blog post which kind of says, like imagine a future where, insights were fully automated. You could import your data into Dovetail in a single click, and then it's like a screen of like a new import experience. And then after you do that, Dovetail will automatically highlight key moments, add tags, create insights for you. And then we have some screens that show that. And we kind of walk the company through that at an all hands or at demos, and sort of get people thinking about how the future could look. So the whole thing gets done, usually in 5 days.
Got it. Very detailed. That's super helpful. I think that the major gap I've personally experienced being on the receiving end of seeing some of these vision workshops is that 12 months down the line, I look at like how effective the stuff we shipped was compared to our vision. It's like, 60, 70% of what we wanted, especially when it comes to like AI functionality. So how do you make sure that we've talked about quality being like really kind of your calling card when I talk to customers about you guys? How do you make sure that that quality is there where what you deliver 11, 12 months down the line is that vision that you wanted?
Yeah, I think like we deliver stuff and then we kind of keep refining. Like I think a good example is Magic Search. I mean, we came up with that idea, that concept at the end of last year in a vision workshop. And we were like, okay, what if you could do a search and you could get an answer? You could just ask questions and so on, rather than just doing keyword search and everything like this. And so we came up with that idea. Then we built that, launched that in April at our conference. And then we got a bunch of, feedback from customers, a lot of positive feedback, but then people asked for various things. And so then we kind of refined it over the last 6 months. For example, we added like streaming. So now the response, rather than just like loading for a few seconds, it'll like stream in the text, just like ChatGPT does. We added, we changed the prompt a whole bunch, and the underlying kind of, the large language model implementation to give more accurate answers and provide more citations. We added support for channels to contribute to the answers, and a bunch of other features. We upgraded the model, made it faster. So it didn't really stop, I guess, when we shipped it. Like, we kind of shipped the MVP as soon as possible, and then we just like listened to customers and tried to iterate on it to get it from 80% to like 100%. And if you look at it now and you compare that to, I guess, the design workshop we did at the end of last year, it is kind of what we imagined it would be. And so I think ideally you can move fast enough that you can ship something that's like, quite quickly, and then you can get a lot of feedback and iterate based on that feedback to get it to the point where you need it to be.
Okay, so what I'm hearing as a takeaway from that example is, if you want a 12-month vision, you can't be shipping the first version month 10. You need to ship it month 6 so that you can actually iterate to get to that vision you had.
Right, exactly. Ideally, you're shipping stuff as soon as you can, right? And then getting feedback. I mean, there's the old saying, you should be embarrassed about your first version. I think that we often feel like that. A lot of the stuff that we put out there, we kind of look at and we're like, oh man, this is only a fraction of really what we think this feature can become. But we wanted to get that feedback as soon as possible. And I think there's another whole aspect to this, which is more in the realm of product marketing, but you need to kind of inspire your customers as to what's possible. And you need them to kind of see where you're going so that they can provide better feedback for you. So, for example, Dovetail was historically focused on user research data, right? So customer interviews, documents, survey responses, kind of like customer research. However, our vision has always been bigger than that. We've actually wanted to be this kind of insights platform where research is one part of that, but then also your voice of customer data that comes through all those sales calls, CS calls, all of that, support tickets, app reviews, like that. User feedback is also in the insights platform, because we think that providing a holistic perspective is going to be much more powerful than just looking at one kind of data source. But of course, customers never gave us feedback on that. They would never say, hey, you guys are missing voice of customer, because they only ever saw us as a research product. And so we had to get channels out there, at the beginning of this year in beta, even when we were kind of uncomfortable with the product. 6 months ago, it wasn't where it is now in terms of the accuracy of the themes, the feature sets, the ability to kind of like the integrations that we had. But we needed to get it out there because we needed to change the narrative around Dovetail so that customers would give us the feedback that would help us become that product that we wanted to become. If we never shipped anything in that space, we didn't send that signal to the market and to our customers that we actually were interested in getting into voice of customer. So I think, the type of feedback you get is only ever going to be focused on, I guess, what you have today, right? Whereas if you want to get feedback on new things, you need to kind of indicate that that's what you want. So we'll often ship things that are, I guess, uncomfortably early, purely so that we can create a dialogue around that idea or that feature or that product, and then get our customers actually thinking, oh, hey, actually it would be cool if Dovetail did this, and this has opened up a whole new set of possibilities for me in how I think about Dovetail. And in fact, that's exactly what's happened. We've had, since we launched channels, we've had a lot of our customers, especially in enterprise, they've come to our customer success team and they've been like, man, I had never even considered what it would be like to have our voice of customer data in Dovetail. And I'd never even thought about, being able to ask a question and get an answer across all of our VOC data as well as all of our user research. But now that you guys have put that out there, I understand the possibilities, and this is really cool. And it's going to help us break down team silos, and it's going to help us, centralize fragmented data sets. And by the way, can you build the following integrations, and can it do this and can it do that? And I'm looking for, and so then they start giving you all their feature requests. But of course, if you didn't do it in the first place, you wouldn't even expand their mind to the possibilities.
This episode is brought to you by Dovetail, the AI-first customer insights hub for all teams. Dovetail has always been the go-to tool for teams that want to find insights in customer calls, user interviews, or documents. Now they've stepped it up with the release of Dovetail 3.0. It's 3 new products and a ton of AI features that make it faster and easier than ever before to truly get to the heart of what your customers want. You can get a real-time pulse on what your customers are thinking with Dovetail's automated feedback analysis platform, Channels, or pull summaries and insights from every customer interaction your team has ever had using their conversational AI, Ask Dovetail. You can even recruit from over 3 million participants directly in Dovetail. All of this is just the tip of the iceberg. Dovetail wants to give everyone in the organization instant access to their customers at any time. From roadmaps, discovery to strategy sessions, and more, it's never been easier to make customer-centric decisions. The good news? Listeners of this podcast can try Dovetail's Pro plan along with their newest products and features free for 30 days. Just go to dovetail.com/Akash.
That's a really important point and takeaway for folks, I think, is that you need to sculpt getting the right feedback. I think we're all past the stage of realizing that we can't just do this stuff on our own without customer feedback, but also sculpting that customer feedback to be at the level that you want it. I think an interesting detail we haven't quite touched on in this conversation, but is that, even in your pitch deck, I think that you were talking to me about last time from 2016 about the company when you were still at Atlassian, you were talking about this customer insights hub. So you actually did have kind of this larger, I would say almost basically 10-year product vision that you're able to work backwards from. That seems to be kind of a key ingredient here in enabling the way you're working.
Yeah, totally. I think our vision really hasn't changed that much from when we started the company. It's fairly simple in the sense that you have these kind of quantitative data warehouses where everything is centralized from a product analytics or business data perspective. Snowflake, Databricks, Google Analytics, Mixpanel, these tools that provide a kind of holistic perspective on what your users are doing and kind of the business data there. You don't have the equivalent for all of the kind of qual stuff that comes into the business. So for me, years ago, I was like, well, this is missing. There doesn't seem to be anything like this. So let's build that. It just happened that, building a research product first kind of gave us the ability to, I guess, earn the right to then go and expand into other adjacencies. And it's always been part of the plan. But I suppose that the risk of that is that you end up kind of being put in a box, in a niche. And so the challenge is we're obviously trying to change that narrative there. Around, who Dovetail is for and what it can do for businesses.
Okay. Now, do you guys use OKRs, or how do you guys handle metrics, KPIs, and all of that? Because I guess, designers can definitely do it, but they're not known for opening up an amplitude or a mixed panel regularly. So how do you kind of handle metrics?
So we have our own kind of, Postgres data warehouse that we've built internally. We have a data team and data engineering folks. We use a product called Metabase on top of that, which allows us to build dashboards and visualize, kind of various things. And then we have a revenue operations team that, integrates all of that with Salesforce and our Stripe data and allows us to do kind of anything we want. In terms of how the teams actually utilize it, we look at adoption stats. So if we ship a feature, or a new product, we'll create a dashboard that basically looks at the sort of penetration of that. So the number of people that have actually used the feature in the last 30 days, for example, number of workspaces that have turned it on or whatever it is that they're looking at. And then that's kind of it, to be honest. We don't really set goals in the product team around usage metrics and things like this. The marketing team has goals around that, and the sales and CS team obviously have revenue goals, but the product team, it's mostly just like ship X by Y date, you succeed or not succeed. So I think, again, it's kind of like just get it out there and then we can kind of iterate on it based on feedback. But if it's not out there, then you're kind of like not going to succeed, in my opinion. Like, I think one of the sort of, I'm not really a big believer in like stealth startups, like stealth mode for startups. I think I prefer to build kind of in the open, build in the public, and try to actually like kind of co-create with customers as much as possible. Because I think that feedback is invaluable to shape kind of what you're doing. So I think the goal for the product team is mostly just like get it done as fast as possible, get the MVP shipped, and then we'll talk about, adoption and metrics to improve it and all that stuff.
So it's like a big mindset shift for the PMs, because PMs over basically the last 10 years, there's been this huge shift from outputs to outcomes where like the outcome is all that matters. So like a PM and their design counterpart, they'll, have a goal of, let's say, activation from setup to aha for Dovetail, or the expansion team will have a goal of making sure 90% of the seats are getting to that aha moment. You don't really structure teams that way. Teams are structured around, after the vision is created, the individual team kind of establishes these are the outputs, these are the projects we need to create for that vision. Let's drive quality to those projects. That's really what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I think, you don't have to over-engineer it. Like, it's just like, if we decide, it's quite simple, right? So like, we're an insights platform for the whole organization. That means that we need to add value for roles beyond researchers. Okay, so what are the adjacent roles that are going to be most likely to buy Dovetail or use Dovetail beyond researchers? Well, designers obviously do research and talk to customers and do concept testing, things like this. So how do we get them on the product? Well, they don't have as much time, so we're going to make it faster for them, easier for them to use, teach them how to use it. Okay, cool. What sort of features do we need to do that? Well, we probably need to like do some automation stuff. Great. Let's build the automation stuff, ship that, get the feedback. Do we see more designers using the product? Yes. Awesome. We're successful. It's not like sort of rocket science, I guess. And I think like if you don't like ship the stuff, if you don't make the change, then you're never going to see any impact, And so the focus for us has always been on just do the thing. Activity equals outcomes, The more stuff that's happening, the more product improvements we're making, the more velocity, the more pull requests, the more, design work, it's going to result in something good happening. So I guess in that regard, we don't spend a lot of time like talking or like sort of writing and debating and stuff. Like, we're not one of those companies, I guess, that, when I was at Atlassian, we would have compliments pages that had hundreds and hundreds of comments on them, everybody weighing in with their opinion on, the priorities or whether we should be building this feature or that feature or whatever. Pricing and packaging in particular is something that everybody has an opinion on. And so, I don't know, we just don't do that. We just don't talk that much. We just kind of try to get shit done, ship it, and then listen to customers.
And I think that's in the zeitgeist. Everybody wants to be like that. So hopefully they've gotten some insights on how you do that. I think kind of the final area I want to touch on before we move on for how you build product is, how do you think about, and I think you wrote about this way back in 2013, back when we were at Atlassian, like some of these normal sort of features. So we talked a little bit about like all the features we've talked about, I think are like kind of like showstoppers or differentiators, or maybe not even showstoppers. They're really differentiators. There are these features that are like showstoppers, like for your enterprise clients, they need SCIM provisioning. And then there's like table stake features, like you entered into channels, so you're competing with Interpret. So you need X and Y table stake features. How do you think about those other features and making sure that they're addressed?
Yeah, so I suppose, we have this kind of concept of like getting off the no-fly list. So from an enterprise perspective, because we're pretty focused on enterprise, there's a lot of compliance and security features, administration features that we just need that put us on the no-fly list. And we want to get off that. So there's a bunch of stuff we build there, including, ISO compliance, SOC 2 compliance, multi-region, HIPAA, all this kind of stuff. But I think in terms of like differentiators and table stakes, it's tricky. I feel like maybe before the last 18 months, like we were sort of too focused on building table stakes features. And we kind of ended up having this feature set that people were like, oh, it's kind of like Notion. It's kind of like Miro. It's kind of like, transcription tool. It wasn't clear exactly what the aha moment was, I think. Whereas in the last kind of 18 months, I feel like we've taken AI as a technology or large language models as a technology, and we've turned them into aha moment sort of differentiating features that are kind of like a bit of a moment of delight, I suppose. And so in terms of prioritizing them, I think you need to get the basics right, but I think probably too many businesses underinvest in differentiators, right? And again, it depends what you're doing. If you're trying to just be feature parity, I got a friend that runs a company, they're trying to disrupt user testing and user Zoom. And so their, roadmap is entirely just building feature parity with that product. Everything is a table stake kind of. Whereas I think for us, we're trying to kind of innovate and create this new category of software. And so we probably spend a bit more time thinking about differentiators and how we can try to wow people more than tools that are in an established space.
Okay. So we talked a ton about how you build product. Now I want to shift gears into PLG, and I love this quote from you. Being kind of at the arse end of the world means that you're forced into being this no-touch PLG business. And I think that was an aha moment when I heard you say that because, Canva, Atlassian, I think those are like the two PLG giants that everybody looks up to these days, Australian. So just say a little bit more about kind of like the Australian PLG scene.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, we're a Sydney-based company mostly that is building for North American and European customers, because that's obviously where most of our market is. And when you're doing that, you don't have the luxury of being able to just jump on a sales call with someone, anytime. It's pretty much impossible for us to talk to Europe unless we're sort of staying late or getting up early in the morning. And so I think that forces you to try to do things in a way that is going to be as self-service as possible for customers. So that means everything from investing in, really rigorous kind of help center and academy content and guides and things like that so that people can kind of onboard themselves to fully self-service billing experiences so they don't have to contact us to change their plan or add seats or whatever. And also onboarding experiences and emails and things like that. Like we kind of just need, you're sort of forced into doing things in a way that where you can't respond to people in their time zone. So I think how that's helped us is it's helped us kind of scale our efficiency stats. Like we have a 3-person sales team right now, which is too small, but for our company size, having only 3 salespeople is kind of ridiculous. But the reason we can kind of get away with it a little bit is because the product, you can sort of evaluate it yourself. You can kind of try it yourself. You can learn about it yourself through all of our content. You don't need such a high touch engagement. Like most of customer success, we have 5 or 6 CSMs for, many hundreds of enterprise customers. And so each one has, like 50 customers or something like that in their book. And again, the reason that we can do that is because they can just send like a link to an academy guide or a webinar or something like that on YouTube. And that's going to be more efficient for them than sort of hand-holding every single customer through every single thing. So I think that's kind of ingrained us in the culture. It's kind of ingrained this idea of self-service. Like how do we get the customers helping themselves so that we don't have to scale the human assistance sort of linearly with the customer base. We can kind of like keep the customer service team small while we continue to scale the customer base and get the efficiency metrics that we want to have.
And you just mentioned that focus on enterprise. Some people would say that PLG and enterprise focus don't necessarily fit together because, your best enterprise winners like Workday have the worst user experience. They have absolutely no self-serve at all. So how did you kind of narrow in on this is how I want to build the company for enterprise? How did you make that strategic decision?
I think we kind of got pulled there by the market and by the customers. I think, if you look at enterprise, they're the ones that they experience the problems that we solve to the most degree. They're big bureaucratic, fragmented data silos where they have, a sort of great distance between product teams and customers. They're not very customer centric. They're trying to change the culture. They're trying to move faster. They're trying to be more innovative. And they have, typically full-time research teams who are doing enough research to justify software spend. So you have all these problems that we solve, right? Like Dovetail brings you closer to your customers, drives that culture change and customer centricity, makes the research team more efficient, allows you to democratize research by getting designers and PMs involved. And so the product market fit is the tightest for us in enterprise. So we kind of got pulled up there, I guess, which has been good. But in terms of the product led being at odds with enterprise, I don't think that is necessarily. I think for me, product led growth is more about which part of the organization is driving the growth of the company, and it's not like our marketing team is. The innovative, it's not like marketing or sales are kind of the innovative teams that are driving the growth. It's a result of new product launches, new feature launches. It's the result of us actually evolving the product and solving customer requirements and building new products that are giving us the opportunity to do the marketing, to do the sales. That's for me what product-led growth means. It's what's leading the business growth. And we have, and then whether you sort of focus solely on enterprise and then just have a big sales team and kind of don't have any self-service stuff, I think that's kind of unrelated. That's sort of more like your go-to-market strategy and your kind of pricing and packaging. And so, our strategy has always been one where we want to make sure there is a product. Firstly, you can always try the product, yourself, because end users, in my experience, especially product people, they want to just get in there and kind of try it out themselves. And so we've always maintained that we need either a free trial or a freemium free plan. But then on the other hand of a scale, obviously you also need people who can help those enterprise buyers navigate the procurement process and understand how the product can deliver value at an organization level rather than an end user level. And so you also need salespeople to kind of help explain that and walk people through how it can help. So it's really selling to individual end users versus organization-wide is a very different kind of thing. But I don't think they're at odds. I think you're just layering it on top and you're kind of routing the inbound based on what's most appropriate. So if people hit the contact form, obviously our salespeople will talk to them if they're the right kind of business for us, or they'll get routed to the free trial or the free product. So I don't think they're at odds, to be honest.
Yeah, it goes back to the efficiency point. If you look at public SaaS companies, a lot of the enterprise companies who are a little bit more PLG, they have a lot more efficiency. They have 1/10 the sales like you guys have, 1/10 the CSM staff that you typically see at that given ARR. So I think that's what it enables you. I think people are they want to learn more about how you do that. So let's talk about that. And let's start with the very top of the funnel, which is how do you even get people to get to that contact page? How are you acquiring your leads? So what are, for you guys in that go-to-market motion at the very top, what has been most effective for your marketing team?
Yeah, so I think historically we've been very focused on brand marketing, and we're not very good at performance marketing or demand generation yet. It's not really something we've invested in historically, but we have spent a lot of time building out our brand marketing and content marketing. So, we do a lot of things like thought leadership, content on the website. We do like YouTube webinars, and we do, partnerships and sponsorships and things like that. We try to get the brand out there and drive that awareness at the top of funnel. And I suppose another thing we do is product marketing with launches and kind of, having kind of something to talk about on social media and communities and things like this. So brand marketing, content marketing, product marketing has been our focus for the last few years. And honestly, it's kind of a consequence, a little bit of the talent availability in Australia. Like, I don't think Sydney is known for really good B2B demand generation talent or performance marketing talent. So we just haven't really built that team. And we've hired someone in San Francisco recently, and she's building out demand generation, which is hopefully going to be good. But yeah, we just haven't done any of that stuff. We haven't done any account-based marketing. We don't do any outbound. We don't do any paid ads. It's very focused on brand awareness and community stuff historically.
Okay. So now that those people come via brand awareness, what is your routing system? How have you evolved that system over time for your product-led sales motion?
Yeah, so essentially, I think we get several thousand signups a month into the product direct, and we enrich them. We look at the Clearbit data and all that sort of stuff. They get added to Salesforce, I believe. And then we kind of have a look at the performance of the self-service business, which is our free plan, and our professional plan, which is the credit card plan. And that part, we kind of treat that as its own business, right? So it's kind of got its own, profit or loss kind of situation going on there. And it's kind of, it's doing its own thing. But more increasingly, we've been utilizing, I guess, free and professional customers as kind of like a lead base for the sales team. We actually don't have the capacity right now in the sales team to do proper outreach, even into our own free population, which is kind of funny. So we have all these free users that could be really qualified, but we don't have the capacity on the sales side to actually outbound them right now. And then likewise, the professional customers, thousands of self-service customers paying on credit card. Again, we don't really have the capacity to outbound those at the moment. But that's something that we're looking to add as we build the sales team out. So typically what happens is people sign up for free, they kick around on free for a bit. Obviously there's a lot of drop off there. They hopefully buy professional, start to add people, and then kind of either they stay there, or if they hit feature gates and things like this, they'll reach out to sales. In the future, obviously we want to be trying to qualify those people and heading them up. And then separate to that, a lot of folks just come straight into the contact form because they want to, they're evaluating Dovetail sort of competitively, and they're looking at Dovetail for their team or organization, not just as an individual user. And so, a game will enrich them, and then they get allocated to one of the sales reps. If they don't meet our qualification criteria, they get allocated to our support team, who will then basically email them back and say, hey, thanks so much for getting in touch. You can watch the demo recording on our website, or you can sign up yourself. Have a good day. Because again, we don't have the capacity to talk to everybody that comes in through a sales form. So there is some qualification criteria.
Cool. So you qualify them if they're enterprise enough or they're interesting enough. You'll then do the whole sales process on them. So it's really focused on those coming inbound to you versus having a really big, I think a lot of companies in your position, they have they rely a lot on their PQA motion, where when you hit certain amount of usage, then the sales team reaches out. That you're excited about building, but so far that hasn't been a big part of your play.
Yeah, we just haven't had the sophistication on the GTM side in the last few years to build that out, but that's something that we're working on right now. We're kind of, because we've been so focused on the product for so many years, we've managed to get the business to 120 people without doing pretty basic go-to-market things like defining a PQL and actually like instrumenting that, and then having an SDR reach out to them, which is sort of a normal thing that SaaS businesses would be doing. So we're building all that stuff at the moment, and then hopefully getting a bit more rigorous around how we do that. One thing we have done recently is put in place a bit more of a sophisticated revenue model and FP&A kind of situation. So we have a finance team who has a couple of financial planning analysis people. And so they're actually like kind of marrying up all of the data from what's going on in the world of SaaS through to our financial side of the business. And we have this kind of like master spreadsheet that we track against for business performance and everything like that.
Okay. So one of the things you mentioned briefly was feature gates. They seem to be doing a good amount of work for you now, probably for free to paid conversion, upgrades, and getting reach out to sales. Have you had any big wins there? Have you focused on that much as a product area?
Yeah, I mean, we've changed our pricing and packaging a lot over the years. I think, the challenge again with kind of category creation is like no one really knows how to charge for like new software, and expectations for buyers are just like not set whatsoever. So you have to try to figure out, I guess, how to charge and what the pricing model makes, how the pricing model makes sense. I would say as we've built out more advanced functionality, we've kind of overcomplicated the bottom plans. And so we've been trying to move that advanced functionality up into our premium plans. One of the reasons we did the pricing migration I mentioned earlier was to try to decomplexify, to simplify the free plan and the professional plan by moving some of those features up into enterprise. And I think you're constantly kind of evolving your feature set, and you need to assess whether the positioning of each plan actually lines up with the kind of expectations and requirements that cohort has. So what we've done is tried to line up our plans with the customer journey. So the free plan is designed for individual end users, people at the bottom of the organization chart who are just looking for essentially a productivity tool to extract insights out of something that they're doing, whether that's a survey or a bunch of sales calls or discovery calls or some documents that they have for some market research. So how can we focus the experience on essentially that end user productivity feature set? And then professional is kind of like, you get two extra things. Mostly you get more advanced analysis features, and then you also get cross like collaboration stuff. So the free plan, you get like one project, like everybody's in one project, and a project can become quite big. And then on the professional plan, you can have like multiple projects. And so now it makes more sense to have your colleagues in there, and you can do search across those projects, and you can use folders and things, and you kind of get more of a team level. So from individual level to team level. And then we have our enterprise plan, which is actually technically two plans underneath that. And so one of them is called business, and that is designed for like a sort of, small to medium business where at that point you need to start standardizing what you're doing. And so you need templates, you need global tags, you need global fields, maybe you need single sign-on, security might be involved, procurement might be involved at that point. And then you get to enterprise, and that's where you have a lot of compliance features like data redaction and retention policies and, all these other kind of enterprise grade features. So trying to line up the feature set, I guess, with like the actual use case for each plan has been something we've been refining. Because previously, like those standardization features like templates, global tag, global fields, we had those on the free plan, right? And, that's just too complicated for free users who, if you're just coming in, you're like, I just want to get some insights from these video calls. What the hell is, why do I need this global fields? Like to get out of my way, right? So what we've done is we've moved that stuff up the pricing plans. And I think what it really comes down to is it's an implementation of progressive disclosure. It's, this design idea of how do you just expose the functionality as needed when you need it. So to answer your question, it's kind of feature gating, but I guess it's trying to line the features up with the value that they provide. And, it's not a good idea, I think, just to try to dump all the features that you have into your bottom plan, because then you end up in a world where you're overwhelming people with complexity. And going back to your question earlier about differentiators and table stakes, it depends on who the person is, right? And so if you've got a free user, their differentiators are going to be very different to like an enterprise buyer, where, HIPAA compliance might be a differentiator for the enterprise buyer. But for the free user, like they don't think anything of that. They want AI to be a differentiator, for example. So you kind of need to line up your plans with the use case, with the requirements that you're trying to solve for. And that's been something that we've been working towards. It takes a long time, I think, to figure that out.
Yeah, what's striking to me about just your entire approach to always building product is like, if you're asked a question or you have a problem to solve around metrics, you tend to like think bigger. Like, I'm working on this deep dive on feature gates, for instance. So I've constantly thought about like, what's on the feature gate. And like, I'm like, oh, Canva's feature gate is so great. It's customized. But what you're thinking a little bit bigger about, like, what are the things we need to show a free user? Most people, when they're thinking about feature gates and paid plans, they just overcomplicate their free plan. So let's get a really easy free plan. Let's not stick, the 10% usage version of every single feature in free plan so we can list more feature gates. It's like, think about what is their job, help them achieve that job, and then put in the right packaging so that the feature gates appear naturally so that they upgrade as their job to be done expands. So it's kind of like thinking bigger about the feature gate question to begin with.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of this concept of like expanding the range on things. So like, I was telling our team the other day that if you take our 4 plans, we have free, professional, business, and enterprise, so like our 4 plans. And you were to plot them on a scale of complexity, right? Where 0 is basically nothing. Yeah, super simple product, like a mobile app, maybe does like one thing, right? And then 100 is like maximum complexity, fully advanced, Atlassian level, customizable, like Salesforce, like hardcore. Our 4 plans would probably be like free would probably be, 30 to 40 on the scale. Business would be 40 to 50. Professional would be 40 to 50. Business would be like 50, 60. Enterprise would be like 70. So they're all kind of in the middle, right? And so what we need to do is actually spread them out. And so free needs to go like further down range and become a lot more like a consumer product that you would just install on the App Store, like something really simple, really focused, that's just going to do one job and do it well for whatever that use case is. And then for us to continue winning an enterprise, we also need to continue building out the functionality for enterprise to solve their advanced requirements. We have a very large Fortune 100 e-commerce business as an enterprise customer on Dovetail, and they have like multiple entire business units, right? They have like supermarket and stuff. They have online shopping. They have like all these other things, e-readers. And so, they're using Dovetail and they're using it across all these like not even departments, they're like entire companies, right? And so they're like, how the fuck does this scale to our, immense use case where we have thousands of users and all that sort of stuff? And so you do need to kind of push up and get closer to 100 on the scale of complexity for enterprise if you want to succeed there as an enterprise product. But you can't then make your free plan move up at the same time. You then need to move your free plan the opposite direction. So I'm a big fan of like expanding the range. And I think that mental model is a good one, because I've noticed a lot of teams, a lot of people, they almost take the ends as the maximum points, right? And they think that, well, the free plan right now is 0. And I'm like, no. The free plan is not 0. We can go further down, right? And so just trying to get the team to think a bit bigger than, I guess, where we're at today, and trying to really implement that concept of progressive disclosure so that free plan is actually really focused and simple and does one job and does it well, while also being able to solve the challenges of a huge, multinational company.
All right. So the traditional areas that PLG teams, I led a couple product growth teams in PLG companies that always focus on are like activation and expansion. How do you think about those? Do you ever invest like even time in the design vision sprint to think about like, okay, we need to expand in our enterprise customers. How are we going to give our admins the right dashboards to see the users that aren't seeing things? Like, do you ever approach those? And if so, what have been some of the big wins there?
Yeah, I think so the growth team certainly has focused on activation and trying to like obviously look at what people are doing when they sign up for the product and which features they're using and all that sort of stuff. In terms of expansion, I just come back to kind of like what are like customers trying to do? Like what are the kind of dynamics at play that are going to drive expansion in an organic way? We don't want to force it. We don't want to have to like the fact is, doesn't really matter how simple your sharing experience is. If there's no value there or there's no kind of intrinsic motivator for people to share things, it really doesn't matter how many clicks it's going to take. Like the reality is if somebody wants to share something, they're going to put up with the friction, and if they don't want to share it, it doesn't matter how much friction there is. Because there's plenty, and there's plenty of enterprise software which is incredibly successful that has zero growth hacks or a terrible user experience, and people still figure it out. I mean, most of the world use Office 365 and send Word documents via email using Outlook, and it's super convoluted, and there's tons of access control issues and format compatibility issues and stuff like this. And yet, again, if that document's important, people are going to figure out how to share it and they're going to figure out how to read it. So it doesn't really matter. Like, this is where I find like teams often get hung up on like the specific kind of like, yeah, but how did you redesign your share dialogue to like reduce all the friction? And like, what exactly did you put the label as a button? And can you invite users via the share dialogue? And did that have an impact on the metrics and stuff? And I'm like, guys, it doesn't really matter if people don't see the value in sharing, or if there are kind of organizational politics at play where, one thing we see a lot of the time with researchers is that they don't have a lot of influence inside an organization. Like the product managers and the engineers just frankly don't respect them. And so it doesn't really matter how easy it is to share something if the product manager doesn't care about research. The researcher's going to struggle to get them to look at their work, regardless of how easy it is to share something in Dovetail, regardless of our interface. And so what I try to do is get the team again, I guess, to think bigger and be like, well, what are the kinds of things we could be doing that are worthwhile sharing so that we can drive up consumption of insights? But then going a bit further than that, what are the kinds of value, what kind of value could we add for designers and product managers so that they want to have a paid seat, that they actually feel like they say to the team that bought Dovetail, they say, hey, like, this is really cool. Like, how do I get a paid seat? And we have like some stuff like, you can request an upgrade, similar to Figma. Like if you're a viewer, you can request an upgrade to a contributor. And if there's a seat available, we'll allocate that for you immediately. And there's little kind of growth hacks like that, I guess, in the product. But it doesn't, I don't think it matters that much if you haven't figured out the intrinsic kind of social dynamics and team dynamics that are going to actually drive that expansion through demand. And so where I've seen it work really well is where, there's a really interesting strategic research project happening. There's been a lot of that stuff actually with AI. Like every business is trying to figure out how to build AI features for their customers. And so there's a lot of like user research teams out there looking into how to build AI experiences. And a lot of businesses obviously are sort of worried about how AI is going to disrupt them. And so they're all sort of scrambling to talk to customers and figure out like how they can solve more problems for them using AI. So one of our customers is a big job search platform in the US. And they've built a bunch of AI features to help people find jobs and write cover letters and stuff like that and kind of help them with their application process. But they did a lot of user research to figure out how people would feel, how recruiters would feel about receiving an AI-generated cover letter. And, obviously they didn't want to build a feature that people were going to be totally turned off by. So because they're doing this kind of foundational, interesting research into how people find and apply for jobs, there was a lot of interest in that work. And so then you had all these executives and people who were very engaged in the insights in Dovetail, and they were like getting in there and consuming it and kind of like wanting to engage in the work. And so, if you're setting up your customers for success by enabling them to do projects that are actually genuinely interesting, I think you'll see expansion happen organically because you're doing something kind of meaningful and the content that you're trying to share out is valuable. So I think, the growth hacks, like the interface improvements, I think you can constantly be refining the user experience. You can be reducing friction, but if you're a modern SaaS application built these days, like I think you probably figured most of that stuff out. The hard part is kind of like, what's actually going to really drive the expansion? Like, what are the use cases that we're going to solve for in different teams? How are we going to get outside of our landing buyer and into different buyers? And what are the actual challenges that they have in their role that we can solve for?
Yeah, I think that a lot of founders are able to do what you're articulating really well. I think PMs and designers, they really struggle with this of like thinking bigger, thinking beyond the scope they're assigned. If they're on the expansion team, the surfaces they own are the invite flow. So they just endlessly improve that, or they own the admin dashboard and they kind of endlessly improve that. You've worked in an environment like Jira. So putting your hat back on for like the prior founder days, what would be your advice for like PMs and designers? How can they adopt this mentality that we've seen throughout the 2-hour interview with you of thinking beyond kind of the actual surface you're in, but thinking more broadly to actually move the metric in a more substantial way?
I think like maybe it's sort of just curiosity and being able to do some critical thinking and kind of like, if it's, because I guess like you're right in that a lot of PMs and designers, especially the bigger the company, the more focused and specific your role is going to be. We've had folks that I know who have, left Dovetail and gone to Canva or gone to Atlassian, for example, and they're kind of like, I'm responsible for working on this really small part of the product that, we spend 12 months just moving a button from one side of the screen to the other side of the screen. So I think you can kind of end up getting in this situation where you are shoeboxed into a really specific part of the product. I think it's tough actually if you're in that kind of role, because your job isn't really to think bigger, like your job is just to improve whatever it is you've been told to improve. But I think what I encourage is, I guess, kind of more strategic conversations and dialogue around what's the actual value that we're providing and what is the kind of impact we want to have on the world. Like our mission as a company is to improve the quality of everything. And it's got nothing to do with research. It's got nothing to do with being a transcription tool that you can make video highlights. Like that's very specific, right? But how do we improve the quality of everything? Well, we believe great things are built by teams that talk to their customers and talk to their users. And so how do we get more people doing that? Well, we need to lower the barrier to entry to be able to do that. We need to bring the insights that exist to the fore, and we need to facilitate those conversations and help people make sense of them and all this sort of stuff. And so you kind of like start from that really, I think, lofty perspective. So if I were a PM or a designer working in a bigger company and I was working on a specific feature, I would just be asking a question like, well, what's the kind of point of our work? Like, what's the impact we're trying to drive here at a higher level? Like when I talk to somebody, what do I want to hear from them? Your feature changed my life. Your product changed my life. It's a game changer. Here's why. That's the kind of stuff, right? And so I think I would just try to ask bigger questions, I guess. I don't know, like, but again, like I don't think everybody can do this because it's not necessarily the scope or remit of everybody's role.
Yeah, but I would encourage any ICs to do it anyways, because having been that middle manager, sometimes you just continue on from momentum. Like, okay, we have teams on this surface area, so we'll continue to have teams on this surface area. I know that last quarter they were able to move the outcomes because teams, again, they usually care more about outcomes than outputs. They're able to move the outcomes 15%. So I'm going to go ahead and invest in having that surface area stay there because I think they can get me another 15%. But if you want to get that 100% growth and expansion, yeah, you're not going to be able to just stick to your expansion surface areas. You're going to have to make some fundamental changes to the core product team. You're going to have to influence them. And so I think that those ICPMs, they should use their planning period, especially use a product like Dovetail, figure out what are the core things we can be doing? What are the core jobs to be done? How can we look at this one customer who it was going viral amongst the executives and bring that to every other customer? I think that's the critical thing. And when PMs and designers do that, I find that's when they win the trust from founders or product executives.
And I think it requires you to have that. You need to have the understanding of two things at a minimum. You need to understand the business and the business strategy and kind of the goals of the founding team, I would say. Like, where do they want to take the company and the product? And then you also need to understand your customers really deeply, right? You can understand like, well, okay, if our buyer, and most of the time in the world of SaaS, like our customers is it's like a team. It's a team or a role. We're selling into the design team, we're selling into the engineering team, we're selling into the sales team. And so you've got to understand that kind of persona really well, and kind of what their goals are and what their motivations are and where they think the world is going. So I think if you understand those two things, the business context and the customer context or the market context, then I think you're really well equipped to have bigger conversations. But yeah, I do see a lot of people kind of fall into the trap of myopia. And honestly, a lot of product managers I find become very inwards focused, like very internal focused. Like they're doing a lot of stakeholder management. They're coordinating engineering teams. They're coordinating release plans, launch plans, workshops and things, interviewing stakeholders, talking with the founders. They're kind of internally focused. And I think that's a shame, to be honest, that the product management is so internally focused. I don't think that PMs should be trying to babysit the engineering team. I think it's more about how do you build all that context so that you can be that strategic thinker and so that you can engage with, the founders, I guess, if you're working at a startup at a higher level, and then take that vision that you've kind of agreed upon together and turn that into something meaningful and execute.
Mm-hmm. And staying on this theme of how PMs can work well with founders and also designers, because you wear that hat, PMs might have been listening up until now with this wildly different way of working. How can they port over some of those learnings to work well with founders and designers?
Secta Labs allows you to upload 30 images of yourself that aren't great and create an infinite amount of AI selfies. I keep choosing them because they're always releasing new backgrounds and new remixes all the time. With their remix features and new drops, you can constantly get a new feed of pictures of yourself in various settings that look great. New content is something you can't get all the time. That's why I subscribed. It's the best quality, realistic, and so fun. So visit Secta Labs at my link, secta.ai/Akash, AAKASH. You get 10% off by using my link.
Yeah, it's a great question. And people ask me this a lot. They're like, how do I work with you? And I'm like, I don't know, like we just kind of figure it out. Like we'll just work together. There's no kind of sort of silver bullet, but I think, like there's an altitude of engagement, I guess, and it's important to be on the same page regarding the altitude. I find a lot of sort of confusion or misalignment or disagreement stems from a misunderstanding of the altitude of the conversation. So, for example, I will bring something to, in the past when I've worked with product managers or when I've seen, when actually at Atlassian, when I worked with Mike and Scott as a designer working with the founders of Atlassian directly, and observing other designers and PMs working with Mike and Scott. And then now I'm in the other seat where I'm the founder and I work with individual designers and I have worked with PMs and people. Getting on the same page regarding the altitude is really important. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So, if you come along and you're like, hey, what do you think about this feature? It's kind of like, well, do you want feedback on that feature, like very specific feedback? Is that the kind of conversation you want? Or is it that you're thinking about this in the broader context of something, or that you have a totally different perspective on the vision for the product than I do? And that's why you've kind of brought up this idea. So let's align on that first. And then the other way around, like I'll often go to teams and be like, yeah, what if we did this? And it's kind of like, I don't mean you should just drop everything and just do that. It's like, I want to have a conversation about the vision of the product at a high level and kind of get your feedback on that. And so I think a lot of the time what happens is people engage with founders and they don't kind of set the terms of the engagement almost at the beginning of the conversation. And so I think even just saying things like, hey man, like I have a couple of kind of crazy ideas. I'm not suggesting that we do this right now, but like, here's what I think we should do, or we could do, to enter this particular market or to compete with this product. Even just like a little caveat in front of it, like a disclaimer, I think will help set the altitude of the conversation and the context for the conversation. And I also try to ask the question, like when someone brings something to me for my feedback, I kind of say, well, what sort of feedback do you want? Do you want me to kind of nitpick the details here? Like the icon's wrong, you're missing a smart quote, this should be spelled in US English. Or do you want kind of like, is this a thought provoker for a bigger conversation? So just being explicit about the type of engagement you want, I think. And that goes for everybody working with founders, marketing teams, sales, biz ops and stuff, like get on the same page.
All right. And then what about the PRD? Like you've seen big companies, you guys obviously don't do the PRD, but the PRD, like as we talked about a long time earlier in the conversation, is often like the artifact of a PM. Like if you could wave a magic wand and just help Atlassian build product better, for instance, like how should they be treating PRDs? What should be the future of PRDs? How should teams be thinking about them?
What's the PRD stand for?
Product requirements document.
Oh.
It's like the Reddit. Like if you go talk to a PM at Google, like their life is about writing good PRDs.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I feel like I've been out of the game for so long that I don't have a lot of context, I guess, on what makes a good PRD these days. But I'd say I think that a lot of probably what you would put in that document can be solved through or communicated through Figma these days in a visual way. And I've seen our teams actually map out the requirements by creating Figma concepts and things and then actually putting post-it notes and stuff around them or pulling them over to FigJam and doing it there, like in a more visual way. But yeah, I don't know. Like I think we just kind of cobble stuff together using, we put like highlights and stuff from sales calls and things. We have Figma prototypes and stuff, but I'm actually a big believer more in storytelling, I guess, than requirements documents. Like kind of tell me the story of why you think this, like how people are going to use this feature. Like kind of imagine a world where we had this thing. Here's what outcomes it would drive. Here's kind of like the impact it would have. And here's why it makes sense for us. It's kind of more of a narrative than a sort of straight requirements document.
I think that is the future of the PRD. If I had to forecast like 10 years from now, those Google PMs, it's going to be like in a Figma file. It's going to be like post-it notes around it. Maybe there'll also be like, I don't know, like a video that you record that like has like, here's a user clip around it, or it's kind of like a Loom video, but it feels like that's where the direction is going. And it always happens in the small startups like Dovetail first. You guys lead the way. Then slowly the mid-market picks up. Then I think the big companies will move on to this way of working. But I think it's really telling that that is what is working best for you guys to achieve speed and quality. It's not like this lengthy process where in a room, the PM is figuring out, okay, these must be the corner cases. Now let me figure out how we will handle those corner cases. It's like you go dog food the product, you go look at it from different use cases.
You know what I think it comes down to, Akash, is basically ownership. And I think the problem is when a PM takes that ownership away from designers and engineers, then you don't see the care go into the work. And that's when you start to see deadlines miss, and that's when you start to see the quality bar drop. I think the reason that, our approach works is because each person in the product team has quite a high degree of ownership over the product. because someone else is not owning it, so they have to. And so I think like, if you want people to hit dates, and if you want people to care about their work and refine it based on feedback and blitz test it, dog food it, and make it better and actually genuinely care, then you have to kind of give them the autonomy and the space and the remit to do that. And I think that the issue is, if a PM kind of takes all of that responsibility or all of that accountability, because it's funny, because like, just reflecting on it now, the sort of pitch for product managers is kind of, you have this sort of single accountable person for the product team, right? Or for a particular part of the product. But I'm thinking, well, if that's the accountable person, then what are the designers and engineers accountable for exactly? I mean, they're the ones that are doing the design work and writing the code. So surely you would want them accountable for their work. But if they can just like shed the responsibility and the accountability to the PM, well, they're going to be disinterested. They're going to be less engaged, right? They're going to become disengaged because they're just going to wait for the product manager to tell them what to do. And they're going to wait for that requirements document to list out all of the functionality that they need to build. They're not going to critically think about it. And they're not going to get their creative juices flowing to solve the customer problem themselves. Whereas what we see is, because we don't have any of that stuff, we don't do any kind of formal product planning stuff, like PRDs or DACs or Scrum or whatever. Like, it's up to the designers and engineers to not only figure out how to solve the customer problems or even what they are in the first place, but it's also up to them to actually figure out how they work together as well. They're not being told how to work together by a product manager. They just kind of have to figure it out. And so it's different for each team. But I think what that creates is a really strong degree of ownership. And so that flows on into the work that they do. I think they genuinely care. And it's not uncommon for, engineers and designers to end up, working weird hours and working late and stuff like this, just to try to polish off something that they're working on, or responding to customer feedback or an incident, not because they feel like they have to, because, Dovetail is just like, I'm a big taskmaster and they're going to get fired if they don't work after hours. It's because they genuinely want to make this thing good and make this thing better for customers, because they've seen it from the beginning. They came up with the idea months earlier in some vision workshop, so they want to see it through. So I don't know, maybe if I go back to your question about how do you figure out speed and quality, make your designers and engineers accountable for it and give them that sense of ownership, and then they will naturally want to do better work, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's been a wonderful window into how I feel the future of product building is going to look like more broadly. And it's very cool to see how small teams kind of pioneer the way other teams in the future will be working. So thank you for sharing all those insights so deeply. I think a lot of the PMs and product leaders, who about 30% of you are listening to this point now, have really had their mind expanded, which is what it was for me on the other side of it, is like, think bigger about how these things could be done. Think from first principles. So thank you, Benjamin. If people want to find you online, where can they find you and how can they help?
Yeah, just head to dovetail.com if you want to try out Dovetail. And we have a community of people you can join. There's a Slack workspace with about 9,000 people in there. So if you want to join that, feel free. And we're on social media and LinkedIn, etc.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find out about the podcast. You can find all the past episodes or learn more about the show at product-growth.com. See you in the next episode.